My wife's friends engineered a 7 day marriage test to break me. I exposed their manipulation, flipped the script, and made her earn our future win. I was tested to see if I was worth keeping. I found out about their little experiment in the most mundane way possible. Her phone buzzing on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. The screen lit up with a group chat called Girl Support Squad. The preview showed enough to make my blood run cold. Day 1 starts tomorrow. Remember, no sex, create conflicts, test his patience. If he fails any part, you know what to do. I picked up that phone and read every single message from the past week. 3 divorced women in their 30s had convinced my wife that our 5-year marriage needed a compatibility test. They had outlined a 7-day plan designed to push me to my limits, deny intimacy, pick fights over nothing, compare me to other men, test my financial boundaries, make me prove I deserved her. The final message from her best friend made my jaw clench. Trust us. If he's really worth it, he'll fight for you. If not, better to know now before you waste more time. When she walked into the kitchen 20 minutes later, towel wrapped around her hair, I was sitting at the table with her phone face up between us. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady as steel. She glanced at the phone and I watched the color drain from her face. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." I leaned back in my chair. "So, you and your divorced friends decided I need to prove I'm worth keeping. That's fascinating." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "They were just trying to help." "Help?" I stood up slowly. "Help you destroy our marriage with manufactured drama? Help you treat me like I'm some contestant on a reality show? You're overreacting." The word came out sharp enough to cut glass. I'm reacting perfectly appropriately to discovering my wife planned to psychologically manipulate me for a week because her bitter friends convinced her our marriage was questionable. She tried to step closer, but I held up a hand. "Here's what's going to happen. You have exactly 24 hours to decide if you want to be married to me or if you want to play games with your little support group. Because I don't do tests. I don't jump through hoops. And I sure as hell don't prove my worth to someone who should already know it. That's not fair." "Fair?" I almost laughed. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been coming to me directly if you had concerns about our relationship. Fair would have been having an adult conversation instead of plotting behind my back with women who clearly can't maintain their own marriages." Her face flushed red. "They're my friends. They're saboteurs. And if you can't see that, then maybe this little test of theirs is exactly what we needed, just not in the way they intended." I picked up her phone and handed it to her. "Call them right now. Tell them the test is off. Tell them you realized how insane this whole thing is. Or don't. But understand that if you choose their advice over our marriage, you're choosing to end it." She stared at the phone like it might explode. "You can't give me ultimatums." "I'm not giving you an ultimatum. I'm giving you clarity. You want to test if I'm worth keeping. I just realized I should be testing if you're worth keeping. And so far the results aren't looking good." The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. "So what now?" she whispered. "Now you decide. Do you want to be married to me? Or do you want to be a puppet for 3 bitter women who are probably celebrating every marriage they can convince you to destroy?" I walked toward the stairs, then paused. "And just so we're clear, if you choose them, don't expect me to stick around begging. I know my worth, even if you need your friends to help you figure out yours." Her phone buzzed in her hands. Another message from the support squad, probably wondering why she hadn't started the games yet. 24 hours, I repeated. Choose wisely. I left her standing in that kitchen, staring at her phone, probably realizing for the first time that her little test had backfired spectacularly. She thought she was going to spend 7 days evaluating me. Instead, she had 1 day to prove she deserved even 1 more minute of my time. 24 hours came and went. She never called her friends. She never chose, so I chose for both of us. The next morning, I was up before dawn, moving my clothes to the guest room. By the time she stumbled downstairs for coffee, I was already dressed for work with 2 cups sitting on opposite sides of the kitchen island. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyeing the distance between our coffee cups like it was a chasm. "Making adjustments," I said, taking a sip. "Since you decided to keep your testing committee, I decided to make some executive decisions of my own. You can't just move out of our bedroom." I didn't move out. I relocated. There's a difference. I pulled out my phone and showed her the banking app. I also relocated half our joint account into my personal account. Funny how easy that is when your name is on everything. Her eyes went wide. "You can't do that." I absolutely can. And I did. See, while you were getting advice from the divorce brigade, I was getting advice from my lawyer. Turns out protecting yourself when your spouse is planning psychological warfare is not only legal, it's recommended. She grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it back smoothly. Don't. My voice carried enough ice to freeze hell over. You lost the privilege of touching my personal property when you decided I needed to be tested like a lab rat. Her phone buzzed. The support squad was probably wondering why she hadn't reported back on day 1 of Operation Destroy Marriage. They're asking about yesterday, she said quietly. I bet they are. What did you tell them? Nothing yet. Perfect. Here's what you're going to tell them. I set down my coffee and looked her dead in the eye. You're going to tell them that their little test worked perfectly. You discovered exactly what kind of man you married, the kind who doesn't play games. Her mouth opened to protest, but I continued. Or you can keep following their playbook. But understand that every day you choose them over us, I choose myself over this marriage. And unlike you, I don't need a committee to make my decisions. She looked down at her phone as it buzzed again. They think they're helping. They think they're helping themselves feel better about their own failures. Misery loves company, and they found the perfect recruit. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Where are you going? To work. You know, that place where I go to provide for the lifestyle your friends apparently think you should, be testing me to see if I deserve to maintain. That's exactly what it is. I paused at the door. Oh, and I canceled your credit card, the one attached to my account. If you want to buy things, use your own money. Consider it part of my counter test. The color drained from her face. You can't be serious. Dead serious. You want to evaluate whether I'm worth keeping? Let's see how you do without the benefits of being kept. I opened the door, then looked back one more time. Your friends are waiting for a report. Better let them know that day 1 of their test was very enlightening, just not in the way they expected. When I got home that evening, she was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and papers scattered everywhere. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Rough day? I asked, hanging up my jacket. I've been looking at apartments. Smart, forward-thinking. I respect that. She looked up, startled. You want me to move out? I want you to make adult decisions. If you've decided that our marriage needs to be tested by your divorced friends, then maybe living separately while you figure out what you want is the mature thing to do. I don't want to move out. Then stop acting like someone who's planning to leave. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients for dinner. You can't have it both ways. You can't treat me like I'm on trial while expecting me to act like we're happily married. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, then at me. They want to know if you've started begging yet. I almost laughed. What did you tell them? Nothing. I haven't responded all day. Why not? She was quiet for a long moment. Because everything went wrong. You weren't supposed to find out. You weren't supposed to take control. Take control? I stopped chopping vegetables and looked at her. I didn't take control. I stopped giving it away. There's a difference. They said you'd either fight for me or show your true colors. Well, they got half of it right. I did show my true colors. Turns out my true colors include self-respect, boundaries, and zero tolerance for manipulation. Her laptop screen showed rental listings, all of them significantly smaller and more expensive than our house. Having second thoughts about the independent woman lifestyle, I asked. This isn't what I wanted. No, this is exactly what you wanted. You just thought you'd be the one calling the shots. You thought I'd dance to their tune and prove myself worthy of your attention. I went back to making dinner for one. You're not even going to ask me to stay? I looked up from the stove. Why would I ask someone to stay who's actively planning to leave? That would be pathetic. And whatever else I am, I'm not pathetic. Her phone buzzed one more time. She looked at it, then at me, then made a decision. She turned the phone face down on the table. Interesting choice, I said. But it's going to take a lot more than ignoring them to fix this. What do you want me to do? I want you to want to do the right thing without me having to tell you what it is. For the first time since this whole mess started, she looked genuinely confused, like the thought of making her own decisions without a committee was completely foreign. You have homework, I said, plating my dinner. Figure out what you actually want, not what they want, not what you think I want, what you want. And when you know, let me know. I took my plate to the guest room, leaving her alone with her apartment listings and her silent phone. The real test was just getting started, And this time, I was the one grading the papers. 3 days of silence from the support squad. 3 days of her staring at her phone like it held the secrets of the universe. 3 days of me living like a tenant in my own house. Then Friday night happened. I was in the guest room reading when I heard voices downstairs. Multiple voices. Female voices. The cavalry had arrived. I could hear fragments through the floor. You're letting him control you. This isn't how it was supposed to go. He's manipulating you into feeling guilty. I closed my book, put on my shoes, and headed downstairs. The kitchen looked like a war room. 3 women sat around my table with notebooks, phones, and what appeared to be a battle plan. My wife looked like she was being interrogated by a tribunal. "Ladies," I said, walking into the room like I owned it, which I did. "How nice of you to bring your relationship expertise into my home." The ringleader, a blonde with too much Botox and bitter lines around her eyes, looked up. "We're here to support our friend." Support her in what exactly? Destroying her marriage? Mission accomplished. We're helping her see what kind of man she really married. I leaned against the counter, completely relaxed. The kind who doesn't tolerate psychological games. The kind who has self-respect. Yeah, terrifying stuff. The second woman, a brunette who looked like she'd been sucking lemons, spoke up. "A real man would fight for his marriage. A real man doesn't have to fight for something that should be freely given. A real man also doesn't beg women who think he needs to prove his worth. So you're just giving up?" The third one chimed in. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing not to participate in amateur-hour relationship therapy conducted by 3 women who couldn't keep their own marriages together." The silence was deafening. I'd hit the target dead center. The blonde recovered first. "Our relationship status doesn't invalidate our advice. Actually, it does. You're like financial advisors who are all bankrupt. Why would anyone take advice from people who've proven they can't do what they're teaching?" My wife finally spoke. "They're just trying to help. They're trying to feel better about their own failures by creating more of them. Misery loves company, and you've been recruited as the latest member." I walked to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, taking my time opening it while they all stared. "Here's what's really happening here," I said, taking a slow sip. 3 bitter women convinced a married woman that her husband needed to be tested, not because there was anything wrong with the marriage, but because seeing other people happy reminded them of what they lost. The brunette's face turned red. "You don't know anything about our situations." "I know enough. I know you've been divorced for 2 years and you're still angry." I pointed to the blonde. "I know you are on husband, number 3, and already complaining about him. And you," I looked at the third one, "have been single for 4 years and have convinced yourself it's by choice. How dare you?" "How dare I what? Point out the obvious. You think I haven't noticed the pattern? Every married woman in your little group ends up divorced within a year. That's not coincidence. That's intentional sabotage." I turned to my wife, "And you fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker." "That's not fair," she said weakly. "What's not fair is sitting in my kitchen planning my psychological torture with women who see successful marriages as personal insults to their own failures." The blonde stood up. "We don't have to listen to this." "You're absolutely right, you don't. There's the door." I pointed toward the exit. "Use it. We're not leaving our friend. Your friend is a grown woman who can make her own decisions. Or at least she used to be before you 3 started making them for her." I looked directly at my wife. "So, what's it going to be? Are you going to let these women continue running your life, or are you going to ask them to leave and have an adult conversation with your husband?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My wife started, then stopped. Then finally, "Yes. I think you should leave." She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at her friends. The blonde's jaw dropped. "Excuse me? I need to talk to my husband alone." "After everything we've done for you?" "Everything you've done to me," my wife corrected, and I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. The 3 women gathered their materials like generals retreating from a lost battle. The blonde made one last attempt. "When this backfires, don't call us." "If this backfires," I said, "she won't need to call anyone because she'll be talking to her husband instead of a committee." They filed out like a defeated army, shooting daggers at me and disappointed looks at her. When the door closed, the house felt different, quieter, like a storm had passed. "They hate me now," she said quietly. "Good. Hate from people who were trying to destroy your marriage is actually a positive sign." She looked at me for the first time in days, really looked at me. I messed up, didn't I? You let 3 miserable women convince you that our marriage was something it wasn't. So yeah, you messed up pretty spectacularly. What now? I finished my beer and set the bottle on the counter. Now, you decide if you want to be married to me or if you want to be single like your advisors. But you decide without their input, and you decide knowing that I'm not going to beg, chase, or prove anything. And if I choose wrong, then you'll find out what life looks like without me in it. And based on tonight's performance by your support team, I don't think you're going to like what you discover. She nodded slowly, like she was finally understanding the gravity of what she'd almost thrown away. Can I think about it? You can think all you want, but understand that every day you spend thinking is another day I spend detaching. So think fast. I headed back upstairs, leaving her alone in the kitchen for the first time in a week without her puppet masters pulling the strings. The real test was about to begin, and this time she was taking it solo. Saturday morning brought unexpected visitors. My mother-in-law stood at the front door with fire in her eyes and my father-in-law looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We need to talk," she announced, pushing past me into the house. "Good morning to you too," I said, closing the door. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." "Don't you dare act casual with me, young man. My daughter called crying last night saying you threw her friends out and gave her an ultimatum." I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter. "Your daughter's version of events is creative. So, you're denying it? I'm saying there's more to the story than whatever sob story she fed you at midnight." My wife appeared at the top of the stairs looking like she hadn't slept. "Perfect timing," I said, looking directly at her. Tell them. Tell them about the test your friends designed. Tell them about the 7-day plan to psychologically manipulate your husband. Tell them the whole truth." Her mother's head snapped toward her daughter. "What test?" The silence stretched until my father-in-law cleared his throat. "Maybe we should all sit down." "No need," I said. "This won't take long. Your daughter and her divorced friends decided our marriage needed a compatibility test. 7 days of manufactured conflict, denied intimacy, and psychological games to see if I was worth keeping." My mother-in-law's mouth fell open. "That's ridiculous. She wouldn't." "Ask her." All eyes turned to my wife as she slowly came down the stairs. "It wasn't supposed to be like that." "So it's true?" her father asked quietly. "They were trying to help by sabotaging your marriage?" her mother interrupted. "Have you lost your mind?" I almost smiled. "Sometimes the truth has a way of handling itself." "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You let 3 bitter women convince you to treat your husband like a test subject." She turned to me. "And you found out." "I found out, yes. And I handled it exactly the way any man with self-respect would handle it." "By threatening divorce?" her mother asked. "By refusing to participate in games designed by people who've proven they can't maintain relationships themselves." My father-in-law nodded slowly. "Makes sense to me." "Dad," my wife protested. "Honey, if someone told me to test your mother to see if she was worth keeping, I'd tell them exactly where they could put their test." "Thank you," I said. Finally, someone with common sense. My mother-in-law was still processing. "Those friends of yours, the divorced ones?" "Yes. The same ones who told you marriage was outdated last Christmas. And you took relationship advice from them." The penny was dropping hard. "They made good points." "They made bitter points," her father corrected. "There's a difference." I set down my coffee cup. "Here's what really happened. 3 women who failed at marriage convinced your daughter that success needed to be tested. They designed a week-long psychological experiment to see if I'd jump through hoops for the privilege of remaining married. And you refused," her mother said. "I refuse to be evaluated by people who don't know how to maintain what they're judging. I refuse to prove my worth to someone who should already know it. And I refuse to let bitter women destroy my marriage from the inside." My wife looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "What did you expect him to do?" her father asked her. "Beg? Chase you around like a lost puppy?" "I expected him to try harder." "Try harder at what?" I asked. "Being manipulated, being disrespected, being treated like I was on probation in my own marriage?" Her mother shook her head. "This is the most foolish thing I've ever heard. They said if he really loved you, he'd have some self-respect." Her father interrupted. "A man without self-respect isn't worth having." I looked at my father-in-law with new appreciation. The man understood. "So what now?" her mother asked. Now your daughter decides if she wants to be married or if she wants to be single like her advisors. But she decides without interference from bitter women or concerned parents. And if she chooses poorly, her father asked, then she learns what life looks like without me. And based on the quality of advice she's been taking, I don't think she'll enjoy the lesson. My wife finally spoke up. Everyone's acting like I'm some kind of villain. You're not a villain, I said. You're someone who made a spectacularly poor decision and now has to live with the consequences. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize the mistake and fix it, or stubborn enough to double down and lose everything. Her parents exchanged a look that said volumes. We should go, her mother said. This is between you two. Actually, I said, it's between her and herself. I've already made my position clear. They gathered their things and I walked them to the door. For what it's worth, her father said quietly, I respect how you handled this. A lot of men would have either rolled over or lost their temper. I don't do either, I replied. After they left, my wife stood in the hallway looking lost. Even my parents think I'm wrong, she said. Your parents see what I see. A woman who let external voices override her own judgment and nearly destroyed something good because of it. I thought they were helping. They were helping themselves feel better about their failures, and you were the collateral damage. She sat down heavily on the couch. How do I fix this? That's not my problem to solve. That's yours. But you're my husband. I'm the husband you decided needed to be tested. Now I'm the husband deciding whether you're worth keeping. Funny how tables turn, isn't it? The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She'd wanted to evaluate me, and now I was evaluating her. What would it take? She asked quietly. What would it take for you to forgive me? I looked at her for a long moment. The question isn't what it would take for me to forgive you. The question is what it's going to take for you to forgive yourself for almost throwing away a good marriage because 3 miserable women convinced you it wasn't good enough. She started to cry then. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but genuine remorse. I was so stupid. Yes, you were. The question now is whether you're smart enough to learn from it. For the first time in a week, I felt like I was talking to my wife instead of a stranger following someone else's script. But feeling sorry and making changes are 2 very different things, and I'd learned not to confuse the 2. Sunday evening brought the inevitable. My wife's phone rang, and I could hear the blonde's voice through the speaker from across the room. We need to talk. Emergency meeting tonight. My wife looked at me, then at the phone, then back at me. I can't tonight, she said. Can't or won't? The voice demanded. Won't. I raised an eyebrow. Progress. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. After everything you've done to me, this is how I protect what's left of my marriage. The line went quiet for a moment, then, fine, but don't expect us to be here when this all falls apart. If it falls apart because I chose my husband over your advice, then it was never worth saving anyway. She hung up. Then she turned off the phone completely. Congratulations, I said. You just graduated from puppet to person. It doesn't feel like progress. It feels like I lost my friends. You lost advisors who were giving you advice that would have cost you your marriage. There's a difference. She nodded, but I could see the doubt creeping in. The isolation was hitting her. Good. Sometimes you have to feel the cold to appreciate the warmth. Monday morning she was up before me, making coffee and breakfast, not as some grand gesture, but like she was trying to remember how to be a wife instead of a defendant. I've been thinking, she said as I came downstairs. Dangerous territory. How'd that work out for you last time? She almost smiled. Almost. I deserve that. You deserve a lot more than that, but I'm feeling generous. I sat down at the table, the same table where her war counsel had planned my psychological torture just days earlier. I want to understand something, I said. What exactly made you think our marriage needed testing? She was quiet for a long moment. They said I was settling. Settling for what? For someone who didn't appreciate me enough, who took me for granted, who didn't fight for me. I sipped my coffee, letting that sink in. And you believed them because they seemed so confident and they'd been through it. They knew what to look for. They knew what to look for in failed relationships. They're experts at failure. You asked failure experts how to succeed. When you put it like that, how else would I put it? You went to 3 women who couldn't keep their own marriages together and asked them to evaluate ours. That's like asking broke people for financial advice. She flinched. They said, If he really loved me, he'd fight for me when I pulled away. And what did I do instead? You fought back. Exactly, I didn't fight for you. I fought for my own dignity. I fought against being manipulated. I fought for the right to be respected in my own marriage. That's not what they said would happen. Because they don't understand men who respect themselves. They're used to men who beg and chase and prove themselves. Men who have no backbone. Is that why their marriages failed? I looked at her directly. What do you think? She was connecting dots I'd hoped she'd eventually connect on her own. They married weak men, she said slowly. Or they turned strong men weak and then lost respect for them. Either way, they ended up with exactly what they trained their husbands to become. And then they divorced them for being that way. Bingo. And now they're trying to train you to do the same thing to me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They wanted me to make you weak. They wanted you to test me until I either broke or broke up with you. Win-win for them. Either they got to watch another marriage fail, or they got to watch another man lose his self-respect. But you didn't do either. Because I'm not interested in being either broken or broken up. I'm interested in being respected by the woman I married. She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. I almost destroyed everything. You almost did. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? How do I prove I'm sorry? How do I prove I choose you? I leaned back in my chair. You don't prove it, you live it. You make different choices. You trust your husband over bitter strangers. You defend our marriage instead of testing it. And if I do that, then maybe we have something to build on. Maybe. Trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with consistent actions over time. You broke something last week. Fixing it is going to take longer than breaking it did. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. But these weren't manipulation tears. These were consequence tears. Reality was setting in. I thought I was being smart, she whispered. You thought you were protecting yourself. But you were actually sabotaging yourself. Protection would have been talking to me directly. Sabotage was listening to women who hate successful marriages. They're going to trash me to everyone we know. Let them. Anyone with half a brain will see it for what it is. Bitter women attacking someone who chose her marriage over their advice. What if people believe them? Then you'll find out who your real friends are. And spoiler alert, it's not the 3 women who tried to convince you to destroy your marriage. She was quiet for a long time, processing the full scope of what she'd almost done. Can we go back to how things were? She asked finally. No, I said, and watched her face fall. We can't go back, but we might be able to go forward if you're willing to do the work. What kind of work? The kind where you learn to think for yourself instead of outsourcing your marriage decisions to a committee of failures. She nodded slowly. I can do that. We'll see. Because this isn't over. This is just the beginning of you proving that you learned something from almost losing everything. For the first time in over a week, she looked at me with something approaching hope. But hope wasn't enough. Not anymore. I needed to see action. I needed to see choices. I needed to see her fight for us the way I fought for my own dignity. The real test was just beginning. And this time, I was the one grading the papers. 3 weeks later, the final test came from an unexpected source. We were at dinner with another couple when my wife's phone lit up. The support squad had regrouped and launched their final assault, a group text visible to everyone at the table. Hope you're happy with your controlling husband. Don't come crying to us when he shows his true colors. Our friends read it before she could flip the phone over. The awkward silence was deafening. Friends of yours? The husband asked. My wife looked at me, then at them, then made her choice. Former friends. They tried to convince me to psychologically torture my husband to test if he was worth keeping. When he refused to play their games, they turned on both of us. They wanted you to do what? The wife asked, horrified. 7 days of manufactured conflict, denied intimacy, constant criticism, all to see if he'd beg for my attention. Our friends looked at me with new respect. And you said, the husband asked. I said hell no. I don't prove my worth to people who should already know it. Good for you, the wife said. That's psychotic. My wife's phone buzzed again. Another message, nastier than the first. Without hesitation, she blocked all 3 numbers, deleted the group chat, and looked directly at our friends. My husband was right. They were bitter women trying to destroy happy marriages because they couldn't stand seeing what they'd lost. She turned to me. I almost lost the best thing in my life because I listened to the worst advice possible. "What changed your mind?" our friend asked. He did. He refused to dance to their tune. He maintained his dignity while I was losing mine. He showed me what self-respect looks like. I felt pride for the first time in weeks, not because she was praising me, but because she'd finally understood the lesson. "So, you chose him over them?" the wife asked. "I chose my marriage over their bitterness. I chose to trust my husband over 3 women who'd proven they couldn't keep their own." The conversation moved on, but the damage to her former friends was complete. By morning, half our social circle would know the truth about their support group. Later that night, she moved her things back into our bedroom without asking permission, not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet acknowledgement of where she belonged. "Thank you," she said as we got ready for bed. "For what?" "For not letting me destroy us. For being stronger than their manipulation. For showing me what I almost threw away. I didn't save us. You did. When you chose to block those numbers tonight, you saved us. But if you hadn't stood your ground, if you'd begged and pleaded and proven yourself, you would have lost respect for me, just like they lost respect for their husbands." She nodded. "They trained them to be weak, then divorced them for being weak. And they almost trained you to make me weak. The difference is, I didn't let them. What happens now? Now you remember this lesson. Remember what it feels like to almost lose something good, because bitter people convinced you it wasn't good enough. I will. And the next time someone suggests I test my marriage, I'll know what to tell them. That I already know what I have, and I'm not interested in risking it to satisfy someone else's misery." Perfect answer. 6 months later, all 3 of her former friends were single and angrier than ever. Word had spread about their testing strategy, and no married woman would take their advice. Meanwhile, we were stronger than before. Not because we'd survived their test, but because she'd learned to value what we had instead of questioning it. The real test hadn't been whether I was worth keeping. It had been whether she was smart enough to recognize manipulation when she saw it. She passed, barely, but she passed. And I never had to prove my worth to anyone again.